So I did a little bit of meditation, and one thing struck my mind. Money is strange, but so is this. So, one of my mentors looked at a note. In fact, let me show you. Right? This is £20, yeah? Like this, yeah? Now, on this note, there is a very, very small, right? Very, very small, but noticeable comment. Very, very noticeable. And this kind of made me a little bit upset, but at the same time reveals a big truth. Because a lot of people, when we're young, like when we're in our 20s, and you look at some of these other self-improvement YouTubers, you look at, well, I wouldn't call myself self-improvement, actually. It's probably a bit of I kind of am, but I'm kind of not. But basically, when we look at some of these self-improvement YouTubers, look at the people who have money, look at all of that stuff. There's one thing that came to my mind that I didn't understand. And it's this very simple paradox. If I look at this note, what does it say? I don't know if you can see it properly, but it's not where it says Bank of England. It's the bit underneath, and it's it doesn't come out well on the camera. But basically what it says is this. It says, and I quote, right? And this is on any single note, by the way. It says, I promise to... All right, it says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. Let me say that again. I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. And that is where my money troubles and the way I saw money started. Because this basically is a lie. It's a lie. Because how can this, which says £20 on it, be the bearer of the sum total of £20? It doesn't make sense. But here's a question that I propose to you. If that £20 didn't exist, and you was in the middle of the forest, you didn't have £20 in your pocket. All you did was see a tree. Let's say this is a coconut tree, right? Make it realistic. A green coconut tree, which you can find, in Asia and places like that. They grow in the forest as well, right? Bananas, for example. Here's the thing that made the paradox for me more obvious. If that tree had existed for years, and it was the only thing that you had in terms of your survival, is that worth more than the £20? I don't mean that as a question of philosophy or Socrates. I mean it as maybe we are forgetting what truly matters. Maybe we are so obsessed with this, thinking that we can buy our own survival, we've forgotten what it means to be primitive in our own survival. It really got me thinking, and it's strange. Like I come from a family, who was in farming and did all that kind of thing, and is now moving towards capitalism, right? With stuff like their own businesses and stuff like that. But I just find it strange because in the modern world, this is fiat currency, right? And what's strange is with fiat currency, it's not denoted by anything. So there's nothing that backs it up. So it's not a case of, the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. I think that I'm beginning to think that we misvalue what the concept of being rich actually means. Because this exchanges hands, right? Currency being current. But the permanent fixture of our own survival is not currency. It's food, water, and shelter. Because this can be taken away at a moment's notice. But if the other three aren't in place, then we simply lack the skills to cultivate it. Because if I think about it, our ancestors were building dwellings from caves, sticks and stones, breaking bones. But words cannot hurt me. How interesting is that? And I see a lot of these self-improvement YouTubers, they go on, they say, oh yeah, our ancestors and testosterone and all this kind of stuff. But you ever notice that they never seem to go back far enough to understand the meaning of the meaning in which they talk, in which they speak. It's very interesting. Like I was that kid and yeah, but then you never thought to question what this actually is. You never thought to think, oh, actually, maybe we're chasing the wrong thing. Oh, we got assets and liabilities. Yeah, but what does the asset mean to you? What does a liability mean to you? Because I remember talking to a monk when I was going to the Jamyang temple. And I said, isn't it funny that if you go to different places in the world, their happiness isn't dependent on the currency necessarily, but more on the duty and fulfillment of the work in which they produce. And what's even more funny is you can have two people in the same. The monk told me this. He said, Danny, you can have two people in the same place and look through the world in different ways. He said, you can have an ascetic on the street, an absolute beggar, but he's euphoric in his nature. Euphoric in his nature. You can have another person who's right beside him, begging on the street. But his nature is not euphoric. It is only in the promise of seeking this, which in itself is a lie. So my question to you is, and even to myself, is when chasing things like this, right? What does it necessarily mean to us? Because if that is just a promissory note, then are we chasing the right thing? I'm not saying it. What I'm saying is it's not bad to have lots of money. It's not bad to, go after your 10K a month or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, right? Monetarily. I totally understand it. I'm saying, is there a deeper meaning to it? What I'm trying to say is, when I think about this, is this going to make me happy because I see it as a means of survival? Or do I think because I have it, it's going to ultimately make me happy? And the very, very weird thing about it is the psychology of it. In fact, there's a book called The Psychology of Money, which goes into a lot more detail about this. But basically what it says is, yes, you can have lots of money. Yes, you can make it overnight. And it talks about one individual specifically, and I forget the name of it because it's early in the morning and I haven't had much sleep. But he's a very, very famous individual, by the way. And he says, this person made a lot of money during the downturn of the 1929 financial crisis. But what I found interesting was that even though he shorted, and made lots of money, this particular person then lost it over time. So what I find interesting is the only thing that makes this worth anything, I think, to any individual is the belief we inherently had in it. As an individual entity, this thing has no value. It really doesn't. Not because, well, actually, yeah, it doesn't have any value because at the end of the day, and this is why, the millionaires turn around and say, oh, we don't think about money. It's not because they don't think about money. It's because inherently it has no value, right? You can go into it. You can literally, like, it's coming up to spring now. In the summer, right, there's a pear tree nearby my house, right? You can go and pick pears. There's berries inside of the bushes, right? Oh, but that's a feminine thing to... No. You're misinterpreting, right? What I'm saying is, in order to survive, right, there's plenty out inside of the world which is abundant to everybody. What I'm saying is, if you was to pick berries, if you was to go and get bananas, if you was to go and get fruit, you would not be hungry. You can be thirsty, but not hungry. So it's got me thinking, it's like, it's weird when you think about it that way. So yeah, that was my kind of interesting point about money, and wealth. Real wealth isn't necessarily that of money. I think real wealth comes from that which is not only within, as Jung would say, making the unconscious conscious, but I think it's also having, and it's not gratitude, right? And saying, oh yeah, I was grateful for this and grateful for that. I think it's seeing the world in a different light. It's like that lens that we're conditioned to is not the lens that we should see reality through. Because like I said, right, you have this weird appreciation for, because now you have a weird appreciation for food, right? Like, oh wow, like, I can go outside and it's literally a pear tree, like I can go and get a pear, or I can go and get an orange from outside. Like, how weird is that? Like how weird right? That you can go outside, you can get an orange from an orange tree, right? Like if you're in Spain, for example, like when I was in Torremolinos, there were orange trees, like they were in their gestation period before they were ripe. But you could get them from the tree. You could harvest them. And you'll still be all right. How weird is that? But in the modern world, we trade it, we have to trade this for that to justify our survival for something that was a God-given right. Why? Why? I mean, I get it. You have to do it anyway. Don't get me wrong. Like, you still, if you were to buy power tools and stuff like that, headphones or cameras or whatever, yeah, you still need it. I get it. But for food? For the basic thing that comes out of my ground, like carrots and peas and potatoes? Anyway. It's an interesting discussion anyway. So, yeah, I mean, let me know your thoughts below. I mean, I'd love to know kind of like, what are your thoughts on this? Like, does it make sense? Does it not? Like, it's very, very interesting from my point of view because, it's things that people don't actually think about. You have to be in that quiet space to think about it. You can't just, you have to be in that place. You just can't see it if you're not still, like you're not silent. So it's very, very interesting from that point of view. So yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that you've learned something, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.